Hi, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake Live. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast or when I go live, and consider becoming a channel member. Today, I am so excited because I have brought back my all-star panel format. I've got some fantastic guests on for you tonight, and we're going to be talking about our three favorite horror films to watch in 2024, whether it be just an old-timey favorite or a new one. So please welcome to the program Chris from The Morning Mayhem, Kelly from Warrior Woman 99, and Reese from Jester Bell. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have everyone on.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Thanks, Jacob.
All right. So we're going to go through. Each of us are going to take our turn saying what movie we like. So we're going to start with our, I guess, our third pick. We'll work up to our favorite. So my number 3 is Last Night in Soho, which is directed by Edgar Wright. It came out in 2021. I love this film. I usually don't like British horror. I kind of find it bland at times, but this is so well acted. It's so well done. It's got a killer cast, including, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, and Terrence Stamp is in it. Also, we got Matt Smith, the former Doctor Who, and it's about this girl who she moves into this haunted, like, I don't know what you'd call it, like just a rental property, and her landlady is a little suspicious, and she starts having visions, and it's just really creepy, really well made. And one of the coolest things about it is the greatest Spawn woman of all time, Diana Rigg, is in it. She plays the landlady and does a fantastic job. So I really recommend it to everyone. Edgar Wright, of course, is at the top of his game. This was his first horror film, so I was really excited about it. So Reese, I'll let you go next. What would be your number 3 pick?
Well, I'm put on the spot a little bit here because I thought that because I've already talked about 2 of these movies a whole lot, and so I'm like, are we reiterating or am I introducing new horror films? So, but if I need a pivot and talk about just my favorites again, then I can do that because they're always in my head. But number 3 of favorite horror films, and I'm completely pivoting to like what are my favorite of all time here, is a new movie I watched last year. I mean, it was new to me. I'd never seen it before. I'd never heard of it. It's called House, and it's a Japanese film. It was done in 1977, I think. And it's really one of the best horror films I've ever seen. It actually, PewDiePie and Marzia named it as like their favorite horror movie of all time. It's one of the, like if you're like a fan of films and you've probably seen it, but what it's about, and it's really interesting because it starts out as sort of like a children's fairy tale, and it's about this girl who comes home from school and she finds out that her father is going to marry a new stepmom, and she's decided that she hates the stepmom and she wants to go away from the stepmother for the summer. So she sends a letter to her long estranged aunt, who was the sister of her dead mother, and sends a letter to her who she hasn't seen in a very long time, that she wants to come and stay with her. And to her surprise, she gets a letter back right away, and the aunt says, not only can you come and stay with me, I want you to bring all of your friends so they can stay with me too. And so once again, it's very like the way the music is just so happy, and her friends are going on a train ride and they're hiking up to meet her long lost aunt, and they go and they spend the night in the house, and some weird things happen, but it's overall very positive. And then one by one, worse things start to happen. For example, one of the girls goes off to get a watermelon, and they don't hear from her for a very long time. And so one of the other girls goes to find her, and she doesn't see her anywhere. So she tries to get some water from the well, and she ends up pulling the girl's head from the well. And she freaks out and tells everyone what's happened. And they come out, including the aunt, and the aunt pulls the rope from the well again, and it's just a watermelon. And they're like, there's nothing going on, and they can't find the girl, but they're like, you're just crazy. So then the aunt says, let's all sit down to have some watermelon. And then as she's eating the watermelon, she turns to the girl and like opens her mouth, and there's an eye in her mouth. So basically what happens in the story, and Kelly's just freaking out. This is a fantastic movie, one of the scariest movies ever. But the house is essentially alive, and it's gradually eating the girls. And what happens is once the girls realize what's happening, they need to escape from this house. And it's just this gradual feeling in the movie that there's no escape from this house. And the point of the movie, because this was a Japanese film and it was partially written actually by a 10-year-old girl from her nightmares, the 10-year-old daughter of the director. But his inspiration from the film was not only his daughter's nightmares, but he grew up near Hiroshima. And he was nearby when the bomb went off. And so what his goal with the film was to try to recreate that feeling that they had when the bombs went off, of just complete helplessness and realizing that there's absolutely nothing they could do. And so that's the purpose of the film, but it's just so well crafted. And the director was also inspired by films like Jaws and things like that. And it's genuinely horrifying. It's not so much gory. There is some like very, very fake looking blood in it, but it's just a very, very unsettling film. And it quickly became like one of the best horror films I've ever seen because of like just how well crafted it is.
Wow. You know what's funny, Reese, is when you said House, there is a cheesy Christian horror film that came out when I was in high school called House. It was based on a novel that Frank Peretti and Ted Decker wrote together, which, by the way, the novel is not cheesy at all. It is actually a very spooky novel. I like Frank Peretti a little better than I do Ted Decker, but they adapted into a film, but they took out all of like the kind of spiritual metaphysics and so it just ended up being a cheesy haunted house film. Although Michael Madsen was in it and he added to the creepiness just a little bit with his deep growly voice that he had. So when you said House, I was like, whoa. Are we about to go back in time to when I was
well,
a
there's
teenager?
been so many horror films named House that sometimes people will just refer to this one as Houseu, which is the Japanese name, even though it was actually titled an English name in Japan because they wanted it to stand out. But in the States, it doesn't.
Right, that makes sense. So, Chris, give us your number 3 pick.
God, do you have any idea how hard this was for me to do? Horror and gangster films are like my 2 favorite genres. So,
Nice.
like my horror list is like a mile long. Golly, man. All right, so I'll start with this one. This is a couple of years old, and I think by far it's one of the best horror films I've ever seen from a storytelling perspective. Act 1 is like 70 or 75% of the film. And Act 2 is only like 10-15%. Act 3 is like that and it's over with. But you're so engaged and so invested in the family and in the story and everything that's going on. The payoff is so much better. And that's Hereditary. That movie is just fantastic. It reminds me of kind of like, and you can definitely relate to this one, but how Captain America Civil War with him and Iron Man, how all that worked because we were invested in the characters versus Batman versus Superman. You know, we hadn't gotten to know those characters yet. So Hereditary, just doing a deep dive into this family, into all the madness and everything like that before they actually started exploding the story, the kind of the payoff of the story made it 10 times better to me. But if you are a parent, boy, that is a hard hitting film right there, especially. But Hereditary is fantastic. And it's at the top of a lot of the lists that I look at. So I don't think I'm alone on that one, but if you hadn't seen it, it's fantastic.
Oh wow, that does sound very interesting. I remember when that one came out, that it was a big deal when it came out. I remember people were talking about how great it was. So, Kelly and your cat, would y'all like to do your number 3 pick?
She's the surprise guest. I actually, as I was changing studios, kicked her in the head, so she's wanting attention right now to make up. But this is really difficult for me. I don't like. If I'm going to watch something scary, I don't like gore I don't like gore in much unless it has like a purpose. I don't like gratuitous gore just for the sake of it. If it has like a real true purpose or to give like a somber tone, that's where I feel more comfortable with it. But I'm not somebody that's like looking for gore. So I prefer like psychological thriller type stuff. And I also am an old soul at heart. At 33, I'm already like I might as well be 77 with my movie choices. So my third is Rear Window, and I brought prop. Nice. Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock. For those of you peons and nobodies who have never seen this movie, it is one of the few movies where I've actually screamed at the end out loud. So this is one of my standards for whether it's scary or not. Did I actually emote or say something crazy. So basically, the idea behind this movie is basically voyeurism. It's this guy who he broke his leg. He's stuck in the house all day. He's kind of an older guy. He's a little bit, I don't want to say a perv, but he likes looking at girls like most guys do. And so he's sitting at his window and he's just looking in other people's apartments and for entertainment. He doesn't have a TV. He's just looking in other people's apartments all day long. And one day he sees this guy who has, a sickly wife, and the wife disappears. And he knows that they had kind of been fighting and had a little bit of a hostile relationship, but one day she's just gone. And where did she go? And the guy, there's different things. He's going in and out of the house with suitcases and all these things. And his girlfriend comes by and his housekeeper comes by, and they all think that he's just bored, or that he's just, why are you looking at these people? Why are you interested? And he's like, no, this is weird. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. I actually went and read the novel, and it's very similar, although they did add some characters to the movie, which I think were actually reasonable additions. But overall, it's this kind of casual thing of he happens to be looking at, in other people's houses, and just, again, he's not necessarily looking for something other than, mild entertainment. And then he's like, well, wait a minute, this is kind of weird. And, this is kind of weird here. And so it just kind of builds. And then, his girlfriend gets involved and is like, yeah, actually, this is weird. And his housekeeper gets in. Yeah, this is really strange. Where is she? And all these things. So it just builds up to the end with, maybe I'm just a chicken, but I screamed at the end. So I won't spoil the ending for everybody. But that's the kind of movie I'm interested in, is something that sounds really, basic, everyday, that builds into something that's, oh, actually, this is bad, and something bad happened to the wife. I will spoil that. Something bad happened to the wife.
That's the one with Raymond Burr in it, isn't it?
Yeah,
I remember.
Really interesting too, because he, if I have, 5 seasons of Perry Mason, I've only ever seen him, or I should say, I've largely only seen him as a heroic character. And so I love seeing him in the villainous roles. I've seen him in 2 different villainous roles, and he's phenomenal. He's a very scary person.
Yeah, he's a very talented actor. His TV career kind of overshadows that, kind of like Andy Griffith. And even Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart's been in some pretty thrilling films, but everyone kind of remembers him for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, It's a Wonderful Life, the Western he was in where he plays a missionary to the Indians. I can't remember what that one was called, and that one as well. But he was in some pretty intense films like Rear Window, which is, I've seen it, that actually is a good movie. So we'll move on to our number 2 picks, and this one is kind of off the beaten path. Not a lot of people know about this film. I actually saw it because Prime Video put it up for free, and I was like, oh, because it had Boris Karloff in it, and Boris Karloff is one of my favorites of the classical actors, and it is The Haunted Strangler, sometimes called The Grip of the Strangler. And basically it's about this guy who, he's a prisoner's advocate in Victorian England, so he's kind of looked down upon by everyone. So he's like, why would you advocate for prisoners? And basically there was a strangling serial killer in London prior to the events of the film. A guy was hung for the crimes, and Boris Karloff's character is convinced that an innocent man is actually responsible, or the innocent man actually was executed, and that someone else is responsible. And there are so many twists and turns to this movie, and they have one twist that just slaps you in the face so hard you do not see it coming from a mile away. And there's also some dark secrets that are revealed to his inner circle, because he has people who are helping him in this endeavor, but it's incredibly scary, especially when the killer kind of figures out, oh, someone's on to me, and they keep it a secret till about, I think, the second act of the film. And then when you find out who the strangler is, it's a total curveball. You do not see it coming. So I highly recommend that one. Like I said, there's a little bit of confusion because in England and America, it was released as The Haunted Strangler, but globally they released it as The Grip of the Strangler. And so some DVDs they'll interchange the titles, but won't say, oh, it was also known as this. So if you search for it, definitely check it out. It's very scary, especially if you like black and white movies like I do. You're going to get chilled. So now we'll work in reverse. So now Kelly, we'll go to you for number 2.
All right. Again, I love old movies, and I had the opportunity, unlike most people of my generation, to watch this movie without knowing the ending. So this is one of the best horror movies of all time. Psycho, again, Alfred Hitchcock. These two are going to be Alfred Hitchcock. My top one is not Alfred Hitchcock, and I think it's going to throw people for a loop. But this movie, again, I screamed at the end because I was completely convinced that Norman was not behind it and that it was the mother and all these things. And I knew it.
I just want to interject here spoilers, this is might be on this list later on, but I love this movie so much, and I knew Kelly had never seen it, and when she was watching the film and I realized that she was fooled and didn't know the ending, I was just so excited.
Yes, it was Teresa was the one who had us watch this. For those of you who don't know, Teresa is my younger sister, but Teresa had me watch this, and just for some background, Teresa has to drag me to certain movies. She has dragged me to Top Gun Maverick because I didn't want to see somebody spoil my original pristine Top Gun, and thankfully they didn't. But she has to occasionally drag me tooth and nail to get me to some of these things, or to get me to watch some of these things. And so it's always interesting when she gets me to watch something and then all of a sudden it's my favorite thing, and now this is my favorite movie, and actually this might even be her DVD that she gave me.
I know, I gave mine to Michael and I bought a new Blu-ray.
Okay, never mind.
Smart.
The siblings are always exchanging things. But so basically, obviously I've spoiled a little bit of it, but for those of you who haven't seen the movie Psycho and didn't know what I was talking about, the movie is about this woman. She does I believe she steals money at the beginning of the movie. I always forget the beginning of the movie because you're distracted by everything else. But she steals money at the beginning of the movie. She's driving from, I believe, Arizona through LA and then up over the Grapevine, because we always point out Gorman when we're driving over the Grapevine. And then she stops in Bakersfield, switches cars, and she's kind of being trailed by a cop. So that's why she switches cars. And then she's driving up Highway 99. Literally drove the highway last weekend, so I know the exact route. She's driving up 99, and she's kind of in a situation where she needs to pull over. She needs to find a stop, and she pulls over and finds this old hotel with this really old, like, Gothic style house, kind of overlooking the hotel. And so she pulls over, and she sees this woman in the window upstairs, and then this young guy comes downstairs, and the woman is gone from the window, and this young guy comes down, he's very nice, very young, naive type, kind of like an abused mama's boy type personality, and he lets her in the hotel room, and he's a little overly friendly, definitely lonely, invites her to have dinner with him in the hotel lobby, but also almost a little afraid, like, no, I can't come in your hotel room to have dinner. You're going to come into the hotel lobby. So, like, overly prudish in kind of an odd way. So ultimately she stays in the hotel room, and that's when things start to happen. So you'll have to watch the movie and find out what happens, but it's quite possibly the best. It's certainly, on an objective level, I would say it's the best horror movie of all time. Personally, I have one more that I would say is my favorite beyond this, but I will lead into your guys' other picks.
All right. So Chris, we'll toss it to you now. What would be your number 2 pick?
Psycho almost made my list. It was one of my top ones for sure because of the twist of several things, not even the ending twist, but other twists, and brilliantly done. So I'll mention something, I guess, current of this year. Most everything I had was old, but something I have not yet seen, but I'm going to, because it is the 3rd installment in a series, and it is Maxine. Maxine with what's her name, Mia Goth.
Who should have been Harley Quinn. Sorry, continue.
Oh, dude. But Ty West, he's got the series X, Pearl, and Maxine. I loved X. I didn't love Pearl. My wife did. She really liked Pearl. But I'm excited about Maxine. And I've heard it's not like the scariest of horror movie kind of things, but it's a great kind of thriller and whatnot. One of the things I love about the movies, like you were saying, the older movies. I love older movies. And if it's not an older movie, if it's shot that way and they do it right. So if they use, film, or they use the film LUT that actually makes it look like film, the lighting is on point and it has that same mood and atmosphere and everything. I love it. The old 70s stuff, the old 80s stuff. I mean, some of the old things that we watch now and consider cheesy, like the original Evil Dead, I think is an excellent film. Now, it started getting silly with 2 and then Army of Darkness, but the first one, I'm like, this is great. And it was a fairly low budget film. But yeah, Maxine is the third installment. So you've got one of the characters from the first one. This is a carryover into the third one. The second one was Pearl, and that was more of a prequel. So it's got a weird mix of flows on how it flows. But it does follow her continuous storyline from the very first film, where she wanted to be an adult film star, and just a group of folks that were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they got their comeuppance. And so this is a continuation of that story, and everything looks great. I mean, the way it was shot, and I heard they really did match like the city to what it looked like back in the 80s in every way that they could. So super excited to see that one. I know we didn't go see it in the theater, but me and the wife will definitely go check that one out as soon as we can, especially if it's out this month, because
nice.
It's spooky month.
Yeah, great one for Halloween. So Reese, I'll toss it to you now.
Well, so my second favorite horror movie of all time is Misery. I don't think it's as scary because I've watched it so many times. I don't think that the surprises aren't there anymore because I know everything happens by heart. Kathy Bates, her performance in that movie is one of my favorites of all time. It's a great inspiration to me. So it's just fantastic. This guy trapped by this woman who's an obsessed fan. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But since I've already talked about that enough, I wanted to spotlight a different film. And I guarantee none of you, or maybe you do, but maybe none of you know what this film is. It's another foreign film. I think it's a Danish one. And the American title for it is The Vanishing. And the foreign title is Spore Lose. So it means the same thing. It's just what it's titled. But anyway, this movie is famous because when people talk about this film and they describe it, they'd be like, there is no gore, there is no language, there is no sexuality, nothing. But it is still the most like unsettling horror film you will ever watch, one of them at least. And it definitely unsettled me for days, and I can't go back and watch it. But anyway, what's it about is that there's two people. There's a couple. I think it said that they're engaged. They're on a vacation and they stop at a gas station and the girl vanishes. And from the beginning, almost like the first 15 minutes, you know exactly who do it. They introduce you to this character that did it, that kidnapped her. And they develop, as they're developing the fiance, who ends up going, well, it's kind of weirdly structured because like the first 15 minutes, the first 20 minutes are the couple and the girl gets kidnapped. Then the next like half hour to 40 minutes is about the kidnapper developing him. And then it spins back around to what happened to the fiance and then both of them together. So you know who did it from the beginning and you get to know who he is. Like you see, he's a family man. He's a successful businessman and he seems perfectly normal. He even seems caring. But then you see that he went off and did all of these things to prepare for this kidnapping. You see him prepare for how he's going to get the person in their car. So here's the point. You know everything. You know that the girl was kidnapped. You know the guy is looking for them. You know who did it. What you don't know, and this is the hook for the entire film, you don't know what he did. You know he kidnapped them, but you don't know what happened to the girl. And that becomes the drive throughout the film. What happened to her? And that's what happens through the eyes of the fiance, is he becomes so obsessed. He says at one point in the film, blatantly throughout the end, I don't care about capturing the guy and bringing him to justice. I just want to know what happened to her, because it's been years now at this point, and he has no idea what happened to this girl. And you, because you're given so much information around it in this movie, you're like, yeah, but what happened to her? And that's the point of the film, is it doesn't become about the kidnapping or bringing this guy to justice. It becomes about what happened. It becomes about finding closure. So eventually what happens is the psychopath meets the guy head on and gets him in his car and reveals that he did kidnap her, and gives him all the information leading up to it. But he's a very clever person. I can't explain all the details, but he set it up so he essentially, no one else will know what is the exchange between them. No one will know that he did it. And he tells the fiance at the end, the only way you are ever going to find out what happened to her is if I do the same thing to you. And he gives him a drug. He gives him a drink laced with drugs and says, this is the only way. You can't take me to the police. They won't believe you. You know, the context is set up so there's no way he can go to the police. But he gives him free rein. He's like, because he takes him to another gas station and he says, you can either walk away right now and we'll never see each other again. We'll never talk about this has happened. Or you can take the drink and find out what happened. And the guy he goes crazy. He's going to run away one minute. He's going to take the drink the next minute. And then he takes the drink and you find out what happened. And I don't know if I should tell you, I don't know if I should leave it there, but
please don't.
You do find out what happens. And it's a very tragic, depressing ending. The purpose of the movie, though, was not about the kidnapping or any sort of it was a cautionary tale about the desperation for closure, because once again, for him, it didn't become about catching the guy or bringing him to the cops. And you could argue that maybe he could have found a way to take this guy in and take him down by running away. But for him, it just became up the obsession of finding out what happened. And so that is why the movie is so haunting, because it is very, very real to how you would feel if somebody in real life you cared about got kidnapped. And basically it leaves you with a void at the end. And I'll just say that what he did to those two people, it's like it actually, there are little seeds, then you look back at the film of, oh, it actually was hinted at earlier in the film and you just wouldn't realize it. But definitely you don't, it's like a very real thing, but you wouldn't want it's the worst fate that you could possibly imagine happening to a person. So it was a very, but also the hint is there's no gore, there's no sexuality, there's no swearing. It's that's not what it is. Can't say that there isn't a murder though, or a couple of murders. So, but it is a very haunting film, and it's one that doesn't come with a content warning because it's has any of that stuff in it. By the way, it's just one that I would, caution people to watch, because like, how disturbed are you going to be? Because I think is a film that will give you nightmares.
Oh, interesting. Wow, that's really. I have to admit, sometimes with those foreign language horror films, I can't do it, because as disturbed as some American horror directors are, European ones and even Asian ones, they take it to the next level, because to them it's all about the art, right? Americans, we tend to like feeling in control, which is why horror especially is somewhat worse to us Americans, in my humble opinion. But yeah, they take it to a next level. That's why if you look at horror films in Europe and Asia, just how they have gotten more and more horrifying over time, it's intense. But we're going to now go to our number ones. Before I do that, I want to ask, is there a horror film that was not scary? This is kind of a curveball, everyone. I did not tell my panelists I was doing this. I like to drop a surprise, an October surprise on my panelists. Is there a horror film that you watched that you were like, oh, that wasn't scary at all? Why was this even billed as a horror film? For example, I recently watched a film called Cell Phone. I didn't see it in theaters. I watched it on Hulu. It was awful. I knew all the twists. I predicted everything that was going to happen. Basically, it's this woman, her fiance died, and so she moves into this house and she starts seeing things quite literally through her cell phone. Like a video will pop up of something terrible happening, and then that terrible thing will actually happen where she is. but it wasn't scary at all. The soundtrack was awful. They should have fired whoever did the score. And they had Malcolm McDowell, who only has a voice cameo. How do you have Malcolm McDowell and only give him a voice cameo? It was absolutely a crime against humanity. The director should be arrested just for that. But anyway, would not recommend it. I mean, it's fun if it's like you want to take a shot every time you laugh, because I laughed at times. I was just because of the cheesy dialogue that it had on top of that. 2024 film, by the way. This isn't an old film. It had a limited run in theaters, and I immediately figured out why. So anyways, I don't recommend Cell Phone. I have a review. I think my review for it was just released this week, but so we'll toss it. Chris, you haven't gone first yet, so I'll toss it to you. What's a horror film that you had high expectations of, and then you went into it and you were like, what a dud?
Oh, there's so many. I think one, I had to pull it up because I was like, what was the name of that movie? And it almost seemed like more of like an action-y movie to me. But it was called, it was released in 2003. It's called House of the Dead.
Oh, okay.
And I think it might have been based off of a video game.
Yeah, that was Yul Bull, who he's kind of known for bad films, I think.
Yeah, it was not good. And I couldn't tell you what it was about. It was just, I hadn't seen it in years, but that is the first one that came to mind when you said bad horror films, or shouldn't have been a horror film. It was billed as a horror film. I don't know what it should have been billed as, action or trash. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think I want to say I was impressed with some of like the makeup or whatnot of some of the characters. And there was a couple times it felt like it was going to pull me in, but yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all.
All right. Toss it to Kelly.
I don't know about bad, because this movie is actually one of my top 5. I'm actually going to give you 2. Again, my forte is Alfred Hitchcock. I've seen almost every Alfred Hitchcock movie, and I'm just going to kind of fall back on those since this was a surprise question. But this is still in my top 5 Alfred Hitchcock movies. However, the ending is ridiculous. My entire family watched this together for the first time, and we were all on the floor laughing hysterically. The movie is Strangers on a Train, and the premise is this guy gets on a train and he meets this other man who's kind of a little bit of a weirdo, kind of lonely, kind of this, odd bird, and he makes up this idea, what if you paid me to murder somebody? And this guy who got on the train is like, well, that's kind of weird, but he just came from having this massive fight with his wife because he wants to divorce his wife and marry his mistress, and he's about to run for Senate, and so he needs all this to be wrapped up nicely in a neat bow and go away. And so then he happens to come onto this train and meet this guy who's like, what if you paid me to murder somebody? And one thing, leads to the other. This guy is like, no, I don't want you to murder anybody for me. But then the guy finds out about his wife. And so then he goes and murders his wife and says, and now I need you to murder somebody for me in return. And he says, if you don't do this, then you're going to lose your Senate career. You're going to lose all this stuff. So the guy is acting like he's guilty, even though he didn't consent to any of this. He didn't consent to his wife being killed. He didn't consent to participate with this guy. Yet now he's in the situation with this guy where his wife has been murdered. He's the primary suspect, obviously, because he has a mistress and he would want to cover things up and all that stuff. So it's a great movie. But then at the end, there's just some ridiculous, chaotic scenes that left us in just hysterics. And that kind of, on the one hand, I love the movie for that absurdity. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, this was this fantastic psychological scenario, and then you end it like that. Okay, I guess we needed a laugh at the end. That I would say is one. And then controversial opinion, I hate the birds. I hate the birds. No offense, Teresa. I know you like the movie. I don't.
I mean, it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I honestly, it's one of those movies. It just makes me feel car sick every time I watch it, even though I'm not in a car. I don't know. I don't really have a lot of reasons for it not liking it, other than I guess I feel bad because other people like it and I just don't. But those would be my 2 not so horrific horror movies, we'll say.
It's funny you said about Alfred Hitchcock, how he ended it weird. I remember for a while where I lived, a local network, actually, we ran the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, whatever it was called, where it was all of his short stories. And he had one where it was these two gunfighters who hate each other, and they stop at like this bar, I guess, and they're the only customers, and the bartender is this old woman, and she's trying to convince them not to kill each other. So she gives them like a steak or something, and so they eat, and eventually not to kill each other, and so they leave as friends. And then it cuts to Alfred Hitchcock, and he goes, I know you're all disappointed because you wanted to see a gunfight. He goes, but don't worry, the two guys did in fact die, but not because of a gunfight, but because of food poisoning, because the cook, or the landlady, the bartender isn't actually that good of a cook, so they died of dysentery. And you were like, what? Where did that come from? It was so left. Sometimes I wonder if that was like he did that just on the spot. He was like, I'm just going to say the craziest thing I can say right now. But anyway, so Reese, I tossed it to you. You actually had some time because Chris.
Well, I actually thought of this movie as soon as you brought it up. So
nice.
This movie was terrible. I watched it because everyone online was saying that it was great. I can't even remember what it was called at this point. It was a Hulu original. Everyone was saying it was going to be great. And it was great. And I was so like, this is terrible. But what it is it was a movie about, aliens come to Earth. There's a girl who lives alone, and she has to fend against these creatures alone. And it very much like the episode The Invaders from Twilight Zone. And the first 20 minutes of the film are spectacular. The way that it's framed, that she lives alone, the way the scares of the aliens coming into her house. And like right after those first 20 minutes, it goes off the rails and is just awful. And their attempts, there's no dialogue in the film.
Is that No One Will Save You?
Yes, that's what it is.
Okay.
I don't know if you like the film, but I really didn't like it. Basically, they try to develop the character through no dialogue, that the reason why she's alone is actually because she killed her friend when she was like 10 or something, and everyone still resents her for it. Like she killed her by accident because they were fighting, and she hit her with a rock too hard or something. Anyway, that story feels like so separate from what's going on with the aliens. I was like, you don't need this. You don't like I was enjoying it in the first 20 minutes when she was just a character who is alone. I'm like, you don't need this separate story, which is the problem that I think a lot of movies come across, whether they're horror movies or like monster movies or stuff, is they try to create plots to develop the main characters, but they aren't actually that relevant to the main story. And so it kind of clashes. But anyway, what I remember from the rest of the film is it just being really repetitive and it not scary at all. And the same things were just happening over and over again. And by the end, it's like the ending of the movie is like, she gets captured after killing all of these aliens. And for whatever reason, they decide, okay, let's just send her back. And she, after being alone for all this time, just is having fun, spending time with all of the people who've now been turned to aliens. And at the end of the movie, I was like, that's it. Like, that's the point. Like they were trying, it seemed that for a while that they were trying to do an arc about her as a character. Like they make her kill a version of herself at one point. It just didn't feel like an arc. I was like, is it going to be about, her being able to fend for herself and proving herself that way, or being able to warn everyone and save them that way? But it just felt so pointless by the end of it that I was just so disappointed by it.
I actually agree with your opinion. Like you said, the first 20 to 30 minutes are really amazing. And Caitlin Devers, I think, is the actress in that. She was from Last Man Standing, I believe.
Yeah.
She was great in it. Like I can't fault the acting, but yeah, I agree with you. It was it felt like they didn't know what to do. Like they were like, oh, do we make this an emotional thing? Do we make this alien horror? And so they just kind of modge-podged it. But yeah, I agree with you. I remember why, because I had high expectations for that film as well. Because I really like Caitlin Dever. She was actually in a movie that I made the #1 worst film, I want to say in 2019, but I liked her as an actress. I was like, oh, she does have star power. She was just in a terrible movie. But anyway, all right. So now we will go on to our #1 picks, everyone. We will do our #1 recommendations for 2024. And I'll go first this time. This film really surprised me. I heard about it actually through Instagram, which I never take any movie recommendations from. Twitter/X sometimes, because I know guys like Chris and ladies like Reese and Kelly, but I don't ever take film advice from Instagram. However, this film, Milk and Cereal, really surprised me. This is a first-time director. He's made a plethora of short films, which I have not seen, so I won't comment on their quality. But he finally got enough budget to make a full-length film. I believe it's an hour and 10 minutes, so it's not even that long. But it's about a social media influencer. And so when I first heard that, I was like, is this going to be another Spree? Which, by the way, I didn't mind Spree. I just wasn't really impressed by it. But that's what I was thinking. But it is a found footage horror film. The social media influencer named Seven, who is played by the director, he wants to prank his best friend, whose name is Milk, on his birthday. So he does this prank. Well, then you find out Milk had a prank, and they start kind of pranking each other, but then a real dead body ends up on their hands. And just from there, it escalates and escalates and escalates, and you do not see the end coming. You are totally shocked with it. So I want to applaud the director's name. I want to get it right, is Cooper Tomlinson, and he actually put it for free on YouTube. So if you have YouTube Premium, you can watch it without ads, and it's also on Tubi for free, which you do have to watch with ads. But it has a ton of foul language in it, but again, very limited on the gore. It relies more on just being spooky and also building up tension, because there's a lot of people involved with the plot. So it just keeps ratcheting up. And then when it hits the final act, you are totally taken by surprise with how it ends. So I really want to promote this film, because I love promoting indie creators, and it came out this year. It's brand new. So I wanted to recommend it to everyone, because I thought it was great. Had no sort of political messaging in it. It just was straight up good, solid horror. I don't even really like found footage films. So just for even me saying that, I was really impressed with it. So yeah, I wanted to highly recommend that one, because I think that if he keeps producing these high quality films and on a limited budget, I think his budget was less than $10,000, and it's like, where's your excuse, Hollywood? Like, he did this. I think the total was 8,000. And he made this really good horror film. And again, it's kind of short. It's only like an hour and 10 minutes. But hey, that's feature length. The rules of the Academy are an hour is considered feature length. So I don't know if he'll get noticed by the Academy, but I hope he does, because I was really impressed with it, just especially it being a first time film for him, a first feature length film. So I just wanted to shout him out and tell people to go check it out. It's, like I said, it's for free on YouTube and on Tubi, which Tubi really needs to hire me as a spokesperson. I'm always shouting out on Tubi on everywhere I go. So, Chris, I'll kick it back to you. What would be your number one pick?
I'll second the Tubi. I love Tubi. I have a film that I worked on that's on Tubi.
Nice.
And they are awesome. They're wonderful company, and I love the variety they have. So yeah, a ton of great stuff on Tubi, and great horror films on there, old stuff, new stuff, and I think they're great. So so this one's going to be not as old as Hitchcock, but several years old. And I saw it when it came out, but I think we might have rented it from Blockbuster, if you guys remember Blockbuster.
Oh yeah.
And everything about this film I thought was spot on. And it was it's 28 Days Later. It was shot with old Canon mini DV cameras. Didn't have to be necessarily, but for the budget and for what they were wanting to do and the rawness of it, they shot it on mini DV cameras, which shot less than, I think, 720p. In fact, I think it was interlaced footage, so you can actually see like the interlaced lines and everything on it, because it was, the intro into digital cameras. It was fast paced. It's the first time, to me, we really saw these fast paced zombies, and what caused them to be zombies and what the world turns into at some point. You know, it took Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead from Romero and just ramped it up to something I had never seen before. And it was fantastic. I mean, Danny Boyle, awesome director, filmmaker, loved it. This is the first time I ever saw Cillian Murphy. Dude, fantastic. And then also, and I think you're a Doctor Who guy, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't.
No, I'm kidding.
Never watched...
I've never watched it.
Okay. Really? Okay. I was thinking you had the little thing on there. I don't know. But I don't know him, but I know he was one of the doctors, Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, I want to say he's the first of the modern doctors.
Okay, and he's in it. It's the first thing I ever saw him in. I've seen him in several other things too. But awesome cast, fast paced, everything from, and again, I like this is what it had the rawness and the realness to it, and kind of like what I think Kelly was saying earlier, it can put you in that position. Like, this is a real world kind of scenario that you can actually see yourself in. Like movies like The Ring, where you had the static on the TV. Anytime I saw static on TV after that, I was like, uh-oh. Or, you know, the phone ringing, you know, 7 days. Or, you know, things like that just sit with you. I love that so much. And 28 days later, even though it's nothing that sits with you that you deal with on a regular daily basis, I mean, when you hear the news ramping up, like, here's this virus coming out, here's, you know, these people turning into zombies with, it was several years ago, like bath salts and stuff they were talking about. And then, you know, you saw the actual terror that you saw in the face and in the eyes of these zombies and what was happening to the people that were running from them. And again, as an artist, I appreciate when you use every tool in the toolbox, you know, so, you know, everything from trying to get the lighting right to getting to picking the cameras they used. I mean, they shut down like London Bridge and over by Big Ben, and they shut everything down for, you know, for a while to get the shots they needed. And the cars were held up. They're like, all right, let's get the shots. Boom, 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 boom. All right, we got it. Everything good. All right, cut. All right, y'all can go. And then they got out of there. I mean, they got in there and they got out, and it was a fantastic movie. One of the greatest zombie movies I've ever seen. And it may even be a little prolific. Prophetic, I mean.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. All right, Reese, I'll let you go. What is your number one pick?
Well, my number one is always going to be Psycho. I think it's the quintessential horror film, but I've talked about that at length so much. I want to give spotlight to a lesser known film. And I can't believe that me and Kelly were forgetting this while we were talking about which films to use. Maybe she's mad at me, but Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn.
I purposely didn't pick that because I knew you were going to pick it.
But basically, the plot of the film is that there's drug dealers, and one of the girls has a doll full with heroin, and one of the more ruthless drug lords knows she has it and wants to get her for it. So she hides the doll with a man who's leaving the airport, and eventually the girl is found and killed by these drug dealers, but they know that the man has the doll, and it's just unbeknownst to him that the doll is filled with drugs. And so the man lives with his blind wife, who is played by Audrey Hepburn. And so the plan from these drug dealers, because they want to get the doll and go on their way, hopefully without making a ruckus or anything, is that they're going to sort of take advantage of this blind lady to try to find the doll. And they try to construct this story about maybe, you know, a conspiracy about how her husband should have the doll and that he's having an affair, and that the doll is from the girl who's having an affair. So basically they try to drive this woman into a panic about how she has to find the doll in order to clear her husband's name or something. And they underestimate her, and that she's a lot smarter than they think she is. But by the end, the two of the guys who are working to find this doll, finally, maybe their consciences get to them, and they decide that maybe we should just leave. But the main drug dealer, who is the most ruthless of them all, decides to take matters into his own hands, and, you know, muscles in on her and is trying to get this doll. And what she's done, because they've kind of trapped her there, they stationed some people. They've cut the phone lines, and they've stationed some people outside to guard it. And the one person that knew that she was there, she sent out to find her husband. And so she has no way to call the police or find anyone. So basically she gets rid of all the lights in the apartment because, and the entire point is she's blind, so she knows how to move around in the dark, but the other guy doesn't. So by the end, it becomes a real game because he intends to kill her or whatever else. And it gets really intense because at one moment she completely gets rid of the lights, and she gets the knife or something and is going to try to leave, and she says, keep tapping so I know where you are. And so he does, and it's really scary because you don't hear anything but the tapping for a while, and she is presumably trying to get out the door. But then you remember, the refrigerator, she forgot to unplug the refrigerator, and he opens the refrigerator door with the light, and now he's able to see her, and he has a gun and everything. And she actually and the best thing about the ending is it actually has the first ever jump scare, and this is why it is called a jump scare, because by the end you think the guy is gone and he's dead, but he jumps out at her. And that's not a spoiler, because I knew about the movie from the infamous jump scare, and I watched the clip first, and it's coming, but even when you know it's coming, you will still jump at the first time because you will never expect exactly when it actually hits. And I shared the film with everyone, and I just loved, because I knew the jump scare was coming and everyone else knew it, but everyone just screamed when it came because no one ever expects it. But anyway, it kind of has a feel good ending, but it's just like for like the build up and for how scary the ending is, it's 100% worth watching.
That's cool. Yeah, everyone forgets how versatile Audrey Hepburn really was. She could sing, she could dance, she's in musicals, she's in romantic films like Sabrina, but then she's also in dark films like The Unforgiven, which a lot of people say because of events that happened on that film, she never did another Western, which is a real shame because she was fantastic in that movie. But yeah, she was incredibly versatile. It was kind of interesting because when they made Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I still say is the greatest romantic film ever made, when the guy who wrote the novel or novella, which I've read the novella, it's very interesting, that the movie is based on. He actually wanted Marilyn Monroe to play Holly, but she was unavailable, and so they went with Audrey Hepburn, which he was kind of bitter about it, so he kind of talked bad about the film. But even with some of the subject matter that's in the movie, I still think it's probably one of the, if not the greatest romantic film of all time. But we're not here to talk about romantic films. We're here to talk about scary horror films as we go into Halloween. So Kelly, I'll let you finish this out. What is your number one favorite recommendation for 2024?
I am going to end us on a note that none of you would expect. This is the jump scare. This is the real jump scare. Are you guys ready? This is my favorite horror film of all time.
The Wizard of Oz. Or no, it's Return to Oz.
Return to Oz.
Return to
Oz, 1985. This is a children's movie. But wait, there's more. You have to have the full context. When this movie was released, the only thing people knew about The Wizard of Oz was the L. Frank Baum books, which are absolutely 100% children-friendly content. Then the 1939 movie with Judy Garland, obviously. That's all anybody knew. Again, very family-friendly, very child-safe content. Then all those people who grew up on that innocent, blessed little movie took their little younglings to the movie theater and saw this monstrosity. But I loved this movie. I found the novelization of this movie when I was 9 years old, and I was a big Wizard of Oz fan, big L. Frank Baum fan. But this was, I believe this, Reese, you can correct me if I'm wrong. This was Spielberg, correct?
No.
Who was this?
Let me look it up.
I feel like this was Spielberg.
This was that was a very influential movie in terms of its reception, because it was 1985. Was not well
connected to this, so I can't remember. But
I'm looking it up right now. But director Walter Murch. But what the significance of the film was that it was released by the Walt Disney company. Right. It was a major bomb, a $28 million budget and $25 million at the box office. And the reason why it was hated is because people thought it was too scary. And it just was not what anyone would expect. You're doing what you're saying is a sequel to the beloved Wizard of Oz film, but you're making it really, really scary. It's since then, though, found a cult following.
and I am the leader of said cult following. The bottom
In
line,
fact, that's the only movie he directed. He went on to become a very popular editor, but that's the only movie he directed.
yeah, I feel like there was somebody else who was a really big name that came from this. Maybe it was the screenwriter or somebody. I obviously did not do my homework nearly enough for this podcast, but I'll give a little bit of a summary, and I also want to explain why I love this story so much, particularly as a 9-year-old. Maybe I was a weird child. That's very, very possible and fine. But I was not scared of this movie. I loved the whole concept and story. It inspired the greatest dream I ever had as a child, because I believed I was Dorothy in this story. I'm holding on to that story the rest of my life. But the premise is really starts out rather depressing. Dorothy and her family are basically they're trying to rebuild their home after Dorothy has returned from Oz, and they're trying to build a new house, and they don't have a lot of money, and it's really difficult. And the three, if they were trying to do a spin-off off of the original movie, the three hired hands do not exist. The guy that she thought was the wizard does not exist. It's just Dorothy, Toto, and her and Auntie M and Uncle Henry, as one might say. But and Dorothy is having night terrors, difficulty sleeping. I'm very well identified with this character already, but she and Aunt M is very, very troubled and just really wants to fix Dorothy. She wants to fix Dorothy. She wants to fix Dorothy. She wants to fix Dorothy. There's got to be some resolution to this. Some pill she can take, some surgery she can have, but she keeps believing that she went to this other place and the other place isn't real and all this stuff. She's, something's wrong with this child's brain, according to Aunt M. So she decides to drive her into town to see this head doctor. And the head doctor is just really kind of strange. He's like that creepy dentist that puts his hand on your thigh. Definitely haven't had that happen in my life, but he's that kind of a weird doctor. And he's trying to be, he's one of those weird guys. And he convinces Aunt M that Dorothy needs electroshock therapy, where we've already deviated so far from child-friendly content, but I love this story as a child. And so they put her in this basically prison cell where she's going to wait until they're going to do the operation at night. And this woman who looks like Nurse Ratched comes in and takes her there and takes away her lunchbox, which again, just horrifying for a child, takes away her lunchbox and puts her in this prison cell. And this little girl somehow gets into the prison cell and hands Dorothy a pumpkin. And again, this is very like Halloween themed, but there's no Halloween. I mean, they mention Halloween in this scene, but there's no Halloween in the rest of the movie, really. Gives her the pumpkin head and then again disappears. She doesn't open doors. She just is there and then she's gone. And so then it's night. It's time for Dorothy's electroshock therapy, which is again going to be just so child friendly in this scene. And they bring her in and they have her on the table. They have her strapped down with the stuff on her head. And you're like, what is going on? And then the power goes out. There's a storm and the power goes out. And the adults in the room run out to try to deal with things, but because the power is out now, she can hear there are people in this building screaming. And again, this is a children's movie. So the little blonde girl who visited Dorothy in the beginning comes and gets her and says, I've got to get you out of here. We got to get out of here. And so they're running away and Nurse Ratched is after her and trying to chase them through. And they jump into the river in this storm. And the little girl presumably dies, the little blonde girl. And Dorothy floats away in this crate and ends up in the land of Oz again. And so it's this whole wild story. You think that stuff is weird. It gets even weirder and crazier. And in some places, some people might even think it gets scarier, although I don't know how much scarier we get than children having electroshock therapy, in a children's movie. But I loved this movie. And I just want to dial it back. Just the reason why I personally am such a huge fan of it is I only ever found the novelization of this movie and I didn't know it was a movie until I was about 27. So for years, I could not find, I found the novelization of the movie as a 9-year-old, and I read it, and I was obsessed with it, and I loved it. But it was a library book and had to give it back and never found it again. And I looked for this thing for years. Throughout my teenage years, couldn't find it. Throughout my 20s, I could not find it. And then one day I remember where I was, and I was like, I'm going to look for it again. And I found out it was a movie, and I found the movie. And this was like a huge deal almost 20 years later for me to find this. So it has multiple, it has special personal meaning to me just because it felt like a 20-year journey for me to find this epic tale that I just loved as a 9-year-old child. So that is my very weird deviation from everybody else's horror selections, but that is my I'm not saying it reaches the level of Psycho. I agree. Psycho is the best horror movie of all time. My personal favorite, though, is Return to Oz, 1985. Get it at Amazon or wherever you can find it. So.
It's interesting. The 80s and the late 70s, early 90s, like that time period was really weird for kids films. Like if you, it's like if you watch any list about like the creepiest kids movies, they're all from that era. And I don't think it's just because of the generation, but it's like, it's hard to explain. It's like they didn't care what kids were watching anymore. Like any other era, they're really hyper concerned about what kids are watching. But back then, I mean, just in general, Garbage Pail Kids got released back then. You would never have a movie like that released now.
Well, one thing too, it's if you listen to all of us talk, this is just another yay for physical media, because, find those things. I really like, shout out to his channel, Hats Off Entertainment. He always talks about old comedies, usually from 90s and beyond. Occasionally he goes into the 2000s, but he tries to focus 90s and earlier. And he was talking about how one of the movies he has, it's a comedy that he loves. It's only available on VHS. It's never even been released on DVD. And, looking, like you were saying, Kelly, it's really hard to find Return to Oz. That is another testament to that this Halloween. So go and support physical media, people, especially with these AIs that'll probably alter. We already saw Disney Plus did that with The Simpsons, right? I'm not even a Simpsons fan, but they were altering some of the aspect ratio to hide certain jokes because they thought that they were too inappropriate. I remember there was a beer joke where they did this, where I guess the characters are touring a beer a distillery, and it shows light beer, and I think IPA, but they're all just coming out of the same thing. It was like that was the joke, but they hid it where you couldn't see that it was beer because they didn't want to. They thought it was too not Disney Plus. Disney, you co-own Hulu. Just put The Simpsons on Hulu.
Well,
anyway.
The funny thing is,
ahead.
and I know we have to wrap things up here, but there's a movie that we used to like as kids called No Deposit, No Return, and it's a comedy with Don Knutts and all that, and it's produced by Disney. It has been released on VHS and DVD once. It has never been released on Blu-ray. The DVD is very hard to find and very old, and it's nowhere to be found on streaming anywhere, and you won't even find clips on YouTube. And that's just very mysterious that you cannot find this movie anywhere, even though it has a very popular actor for the time in it. And now the reason why I think that it hasn't been redistributed again is not only because it's kind of more obscure, even though I think it's very good, but the plot is that there's two kids and they are going to be sent to stay with their grandmother for over vacation, and they hate staying with their grandfather, and their grandfather hates them. So they catch a ride with basically two former criminals and devise a plan with them where they basically rope these two criminals in to essentially bribe their grandfather, saying that they've been kidnapped, they need lots of money, and then they think that we're going to take that money to meet with our actual mother. And the grandfather knows that these two kids are just conning these men into creating this bribery, and so he's like, well, I'm going to give them the money, but not until the vacation is up, so that I never have to see them through this time. So he actually allows it to happen. So it's basically this comedy. But I think that the reason why they haven't re-released it is because, once again, all of this is just plays for jokes and the kids are never actually in danger or anything. But I think that Disney is afraid of a film that portrays the grandfather, the person who's supposed to take care of these kids, as literally allowing them to get into cars with strangers and being driven to their house and staying with them overnight. And basically there's many jokes, and it's actually very funny how neglectful the grandfather is. But I think that, seeing kids get into cars with strangers and living with them for a time and all of that, none of it was meant to be taken seriously. But I think that Disney would be horrified for people of the modern day to see that they ever allowed such a film to get released, especially with all the scandals that have come out in Hollywood. So I think that that's why that movie is nowhere to be found. But you got to buy physical media while you can, to acknowledge that these things ever existed.
It's true. And we were talking about, kids too scary for movies. I grew up in the Amblin, Don Bluth era. It's like I sometimes I'm insensitive around other people's kids because they'll watch something like Winnie the Pooh that has a scary scene and they're like screaming, and I'm like, what's scary about this? Because I remember Secret of Nim, where the
dark
where it's
crystal.
about mice, and like one of the evil mouses stages a coup against the king mouse and like kills him by dropping a cement block on him. It's like that was all in a kids movie. It's like, or The Land Before Time, which is just another version of Bambi. But it's very I grew up in that era, so it's like I'm always like, it's so funny watching how my sister interacts with my niece, because she's very protective of her and doesn't want to watch anything scary, and I'm like, what? I'm curious, because around 4 or 5 is when our parents started letting us watch like The Land Before Time or whatever it was. The original Land Before Time, everything that came after it was trash. But anyway, well, all right. So everyone, I'm going to give everyone a chance to shout out what you're up to, your channels, your projects. So Chris, you logged on first to get on the stream, so I'm going to let you go first. Shout out your stuff.
Okay, so I'm Chris. I am the host of The Morning Mayhem. It is a weekly show I do. I break up the segments and throw something out there daily for, people with a shorter attention span, like myself. But I do that, and I am on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, X, Facebook, Minds. I try to be everywhere. Truth Social, even. Everything is at My Morning Mayhem, because apparently The Morning Mayhem is one character too long. So you can find me at My Morning Mayhem, so you feel like you have a little part of it too. But I do talk about, especially right now with it being election season, I talk heavily about politics, pop culture news. I'm an independent filmmaker, so I do talk about entertainment news as well. And when I'm not doing that, I do some reaction videos just for fun, and have a good time doing that. And I don't ever plug it, but I will plug especially with us talking about horror films, that I am a filmmaker as well. And I don't really blend the two that much, but Mayhem Productions is my company, and I am out there on YouTube and whatnot. And we do have a film that wasn't mine, but I wrote or co-wrote it and did the cinematography for, that's on Tubi, which is a prequel to a short film that I did. So it's on Tubi. It's Low Heat, and it's kind of like Bad Boys, and it's a short, but it's not a short. It's almost a full length film. And then everything else is on my YouTube. I have it up there for free. It's all short stuff. And I'm in the midst of writing, the guys that I work with, I'm in the midst right now of writing our very first feature length film. Really, really excited about it. And trying to finish editing our last short film right now while I'm doing that. But yeah, I do that. So I'll plug that. Why not? Mayhem Productions. You can look me up there too.
Nice. All right, Kelly, you came on second, so I'll let you plug your stuff next.
Well, I don't have a whole lot going on right now. Those of your followers that are also followers of mine probably know that my YouTube has been a little bit quiet. But I am starting to post content over on YouTube again, slowly but surely. The most content you will find from me is still on Instagram, so follow me there. And then obviously I'm still on Twitter making offensive comments left and right. So everything is at Warrior Woman 91, as it has been for probably 15 years. Just social media has been a little bit quieter for me lately, just because I'm busy with other things, but I'm still there. I'm still live. I'm still around. So feel free to follow me, and hopefully I'll have more regular content coming out shortly.
All right. And Reese, I'll let you go take it. last, certainly not least.
Well, I'm kind of reeling and just trying to figure out what I want to do this month. I do for sure have a horror short film that I'm editing right now that I've already filmed, so that hopefully will come out this month. Other than that, I just kind of want to, take my content and make it more about, deep analysis on films, not the controversy of the week that I feel like it's kind of been. I want it to be more about the analysis and, even about good films as well. So that's kind of my goal going forward with it.
Awesome. Chris, I saw you raise your hand. Did you want to add something?
No, my mic messed up.
Oh, all right. Cool. All right. And for everyone else, like I said earlier at the start of this whole thing, be sure to like, share, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when Studio Jake posts a new vidcast or when I do amazing live streams like this. Also, you can find my novels on Amazon. Get one or all of them. 5-star review. It helps out small indie creators like myself, as well as Kelly, Chris, and Teresa. Everyone who participated, thank y'all. This was a fantastic panel.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Honored to be here.
Thanks, Jacob.
And to all the watchers, I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.